Welcome, Katie, to the Good Gluten Free Girl podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's so fun to have a fellow, you're not celiac, but you live the celiac life. You live a celiac life
Yes.
because of your son. And there are so many listeners that I have on my podcast, but not only that, but on Instagram and Facebook who are here because they have a celiac kid. And that comes with its own unique set of challenges. And it's interesting because when I do client calls and if a parent signs up and they're like, it's for your kid, I'm almost like, it's almost like you're getting diagnosed too, like you have to learn
Yes.
everything. So we have a chance to kind of pick your brain and talk to you about what that was like for you to have a child get diagnosed with celiac and the growth of your page and everything that you do to serve the gluten-free community. So let's chat about it and help listeners feel more confident as a parent with celiac
Yeah.
disease. So tell us, why your son eats gluten-free, when he was diagnosed, and kind of what that was like for you guys.
Yes. So my son was diagnosed when he was 5 years old. It was literally 2 days before Christmas in December 2020.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yes, we didn't know what was going on. We started to see that fall, we had started to notice he was really bloated. He really didn't have a lot of energy and didn't really want to eat anything. He was already slightly picky, but it became to the point that I'm like, okay, you don't want to eat anything. And I remember telling my husband, I was like, he just looks sick. Something is wrong. And then he ended up passing a white stool that it was like, okay, something is really wrong.
White?
And so a white
White?
stool, yes. Yes.
I've never heard of that. What's significant about that? What does that mean?
So that meant he was basically the reason we got in 2 days before Christmas is because he was so sick. His liver was like not functioning. He was basically malnourished, even though he was eating because he wasn't actually absorbing any of the nutrients he was getting. And so that's why our pediatrician was like, alert, white stool, that is a huge concern. So they sent us to have a million tests done. We didn't know what it was. We didn't know anyone in our family with celiac disease. So that wasn't even on our radar. We had no idea what was going on. And some of his labs came back and they're like, something's weird. We don't really know what's going on. And then finally the celiac panel came back and they're like, it's celiac. We're still gonna do the endoscopy, but it's celiac.
Interesting. Well, I'm curious because I have a 4-year-old and she's potty trained,
Mhm.
but like I still wipe her a lot of the times when she
Yes.
goes poop. So was that kind of the situation? Like he was like, wipe me, and you came in and there was white poop in the toilet?
It was one of those things that we had noticed that his stools has gotten lighter. And we have family that are nurses in the medical field, and they were like, they can be different colors. It's one of those things that it's like, it's not an immediate concern. But as soon as we had the white one, it was like, it was a very strange thing. And this is kind of a gross but funny story. I literally took a picture of it and sent
I
it to
would
my
too. I
husband.
would too.
I texted him and he was like, you need to warn me before you send that. And he's like, I just
Incoming
opened up
poop
my phone.
emojis.
But thankfully I did because we went to go do a stool sample because we told the pediatrician that, and that stool was not white. So they were like, well, I don't really see a white stool. And I was like, I have a picture if you want to see. And she was like, yes. And she was like, yes, that is a white stool. And I was like, okay, I'm not crazy. So it was kind of crazy, but that was like the major red flag alert that like something serious is going on
Okay.
and we need to figure out what it is.
So from the time that like how many months would you say he was like something's off, something's not right? Like, do you think that he had had it for quite a long time and you just didn't recognize signs or think anything of it? Or was it like something happened and so within a few short months it was
I
triggered?
think it had been months that we had started to notice things, but it was one of those things that at first when we noticed he was bloated, we thought, oh, maybe we're just like happening to look at him right after he's eaten and he's just got a full belly. And so you just kept like writing things off like, oh, it's nothing. But then like we started to like keep track of all the things we were seeing and like, okay, what is it? But it was, I mean, I would say 3 to 6 months that we noticed things, but it wasn't until we started like there's also constipation issues. That it was quite a few months before we were like, okay, this is serious. because
Yeah.
like I said, we had no idea that he was going to be diagnosed with celiac disease.
Yeah. And at that time, you were already like super in the like recipe development like side of things.
Yes.
And so that's when you're like a foodie and you're involved in like food and baking, and that just comes as a complete like it rocks your world because I mean, luckily for
Yes.
me, I have never baked for anything from scratch in my life. So it didn't like affect me in that way. Of course, it affected my life drastically, but it wasn't like
Mhm.
now I have to learn how to bake gluten-free because I never baked before. I was never a baker. So but for
Yes.
you in the recipe development world and already working on a cookbook and had a cookbook, it was probably just like, okay, so did your whole family go gluten-free from that time, or are you a split household?
We are a split. So most of our family meals are all gluten free, but I do have two other kiddos that we've all been tested. Currently, no one else has celiac disease. Not to say that they won't at some point in their lives, but
Right.
we have family meals that are gluten free. But like things like if we're packing lunches, I'm going to use regular bread for them because it's just so much cheaper. And with three kids in the house, I mean, we all know the gluten free loaves are small to start with. That
Yeah.
like we go through a loaf a day.
Yes. Yes.
But yes, we do it. We do both in our house, just on certain things, not
Yeah,
everything. But family meals we keep the same, so that way we can all eat the same thing together.
that's nice. And you said he was 5, so how old is he now?
Yes, he is now 9.
Okay. So he's kind of
Yes.
just known this his whole life. This is kind of, he probably doesn't
Hmm.
remember life before gluten-free, right?
It is one of those things that now sometimes I'll be like, oh, like when the Simple Mills came out with their Pop'ems, I was like, oh, this is like goldfish, and he was like, I don't even remember what goldfish tastes like at this point, and I was like, I didn't even like think of that, but his GI doctor even said that it's not good thing that he was diagnosed this early, but it's also one of those things that because he was diagnosed so young, it's all he's going to know.
Yeah.
It's going to be so normal to him, and thankfully his friends think it's normal because it's all that they've known of him too. So it's
Yeah.
one of those things that are like, yeah, he's gluten free, like no big deal.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's good. I mean, there's pros and cons to that. And I mean,
Yes.
especially for kids that have been diagnosed at a young age, it's just a blessing that it was caught and not undiagnosed that led
Yes.
ended up spiraling into more issues and more problems, which is the case for so many people. They just
Yes.
brush it aside or they just think their kids just like whiny or, is kind of
Yep.
just their problem child. And it's funny because now that I have celiac, I've tested both of my kids as well, which was pretty traumatic. Like getting a blood
Yeah.
draw from a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old was really hard that time. And
Yes.
so that's hard. And but like now I'm like so paranoid. I'm like, if I recognize a single sign or symptom, I'm like, oh my gosh, like do they have celiac disease? Like I have one daughter who's getting a lot of bloody noses recently, and I'm like, okay, it could just be like it's dry. We live in Utah. She's getting a lot of bloody noses, but I'm like, but what if it's just one weird symptom of celiac
My
disease?
son does. He is prone to bloody noses and has celiac disease. It's crazy because there's so many symptoms too that it's crazy. There's so many like
Yeah.
odd kind of symptoms that it is hard to like pinpoint exactly how someone is going to present with it too.
I always tell people, I'm like, if there's just something off or weird, there is no harm in just running the blood work panel for celiac
Yes.
disease because
Yeah.
the list of symptoms is so vast and so random,
Hmm.
like I have a friend who he has celiac disease, and before he was diagnosed, it was like he would always have just numbness in his extremities. His toes and his fingers would have numbness
Wow.
and tingling. And then once he got diagnosed with celiac disease, that went away. But whenever he gets gluten or accidentally consumes it, that's his symptom. His fingers and his hands go completely numb. And I'm just like, no
Wow.
one would ever think that that's celiac disease, but I'm like, you just
No.
never know if something weird is going on. Talk to your pediatrician, talk to your doctor, and advocate for yourself because I think a lot of the times
Yes.
doctors will say, oh, that's just normal. It's fine at that age. But if you have an inkling as a mother, it's so important to be like, you can ask for any testing that you want, and you can,
Hmm.
it's like you're the one paying for the testing. Don't let a doctor
Yes.
tell you, like, no, everything looks fine. Well, I'm concerned, so can you please run a test anyway? Like to all the
Yep.
moms and parents out there listening, like don't be afraid to advocate for your kids because they can't advocate for themselves yet. So be
Yes.
bold, be a Karen. It's fine. Do what's best for your kids.
It's so true. We were lucky that our doctor was wanting to find out exactly what was wrong too, but it's so often not the case, and you do have to really push for it.
Yeah. So let's talk about Instagram. So I found you on
Yes.
Instagram just because your page is so beautiful. Like I love
Thank you.
following your page because it's so colorful and it's fun, and the videos that you create are just like fun and inspiring. And sometimes even still, like I've had celiac disease for 8 years, and like even still, sometimes I'm like I go to your page to just get ideas for my kids because my kids eat gluten free,
Yeah.
eat gluten free at
Mhm.
home. And so I'm like, I just need some new ideas because we eat so many chicken nuggets and we eat so much mac and cheese and we eat, just a sandwich. Like my kids have like their 5 or 6 things and that's it. And
Yes.
sometimes I'm like, I need something new. I need something fresh. So going to Katie's page is a great place to get some fun inspiration for feeding little ones. And that's what your whole page is about. So tell us about the creation of your Instagram page and kind of your mission behind that.
Yeah, so I actually, my background is in photography. I've been a professional photographer, went to college for it. So I actually started it as a creative outlet because I was feeling burnout doing photographing families and weddings and stuff. So I was like, I have always loved food. I've loved making cute food. And so I started sharing just things that I was feeding my son, and people really liked it. And so I just kept doing it and it kept growing. And then I got to the point where I was writing my first cookbook. And like you were saying, that is, my son was diagnosed as I was writing it. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to test every recipe with gluten and without gluten to make sure it works both ways because I want people like my son to be able to enjoy these recipes. And when he was diagnosed, I realized that there are very few resources for kids that eat gluten free. It's
Yeah.
so geared towards adults, and a lot of the things that people were recommending, they're like, oh, you can just have a salad with grilled chicken. And I'm like, he's 5 years old. He doesn't
Yeah,
want
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to make it a mission of mine to show that gluten-free food could still be fun because it gets such a bad rap, as we know. And so I wanted kids to be able to see that, like, just because you're eating gluten-free doesn't mean you can't still have fun.
Yeah, and make food fun and look fun and inviting instead of looking like blah, like this obviously looks
Yes.
gluten free. Like, and if you look at
Yeah.
your page, you see like this is the cutest, like most fun. Like my kids would love this, and you add so much color and vibrancy and just cute little ways to make your kid excited about their food.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's really
Yes.
important at the age. I mean, the age that my kids are at, I'm like, if I put a dollop of whipped cream and a smiley face on their pancakes, it is the best thing in the whole world for them, right? Like,
Yes.
so jazzing it up and making it fun can help your kiddo eat,
Mhm.
especially after a celiac diagnosis, because maybe they have food fear and maybe they are like have been picky because they've had an upset stomach for so long that it's made them more picky and made them not want to eat. And so there's probably a lot of like food testing and things like that in the beginning process of a kid getting diagnosed with celiac disease. Um,
Mhm.
so now remind me, do you have another cookbook coming out that you're working on?
I am working on a all gluten-free kids cookbook that's actually
Okay.
written as gluten-free as my other one is not. So lots
Okay.
of the fun food that you see me share, but some new other ideas too.
Yeah. And when do you anticipate that coming?
By the end of the year.
Okay. So
So
you guys
before
can
the end of
follow
the year.
Katie and see updates for that. I will link your Instagram page in the show notes so people can see that. But it's just such a fun little place to find ideas. And like I said, I use it for inspiration for my kids. Um, so okay, I wanted to talk about some of maybe your son's favorite gluten-free things. Like if there's a listener that's like, okay, we are newly diagnosed and it just seems like they don't like anything that I give them. What are some tips for like a new celiac parent for that adjustment for them?
So I remember, and I'll never forget this, and I tell everyone because I think it's important as a mom in general. But when I went to get tested, I went to my doctor and, came into the checkup. I had never met this doctor before because I never was going to a regular doctor. So I walked in and she was like, how are you? And I was like, fine. And she was like, no, but like, really, how are you? Your son was just diagnosed with celiac disease. And I was like, oh, she was like, yeah, like you're carrying so much of this burden. You're
Yeah.
the one researching the food, figuring out what it is, cooking the food, buying the food. he at this point really just has to eat it. And yes, it's very, very hard for them, but you're doing so much of it
And
right
you're
now.
carrying the mental load. Yeah.
Yes, you are carrying so much of it. And I was like, that is so true. We do so much and carry so much of the weight of anything that our kids are going through that it's really hard. And it's okay to mourn the loss of the normalcy. There were many tears shed from both me and him, just frustrated and lost and just sad. And
Yeah.
it was really rough in the beginning. And it's going to be rough. And I think that's okay. But we've tried to find some fun things to do to make it a little less awful. So pizza is one of my son's favorites, and that was a big one that we were like, okay, like what do we eat now? So we would do taste tests where we would buy like 5 pizzas at a time, 5 gluten-free pizzas, and we would taste test them and see which ones that we all liked best, and we would all try them. And we all actually have different favorites now because we've anytime we see a new one, we're trying it.
Yeah,
But
let's
it's been
try
like a
it.
fun way. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a little bit more fun and not as like, okay, here's another one. Like, here's a pizza. It was like, okay, which one do you like best? What do you like about this? Things like that. Pizza was one that we had to replace like immediately, a food that we had to replace immediately because it's a staple when you're five
Yeah.
years old.
Oh, yeah. It is. So what are
Yes.
your guys' favorite pizzas, or what's your son's favorite pizza right now?
So he currently really likes the Milton cauliflower crust, which are really good.
Yeah,
We were
that's
like those. Yes, I like a thicker crust. I do like that one, but a thicker crust is also really hard to find.
it is.
Gluten free, but Feel Good Foods has a thicker one that I really like myself. But honestly, I'm like, there's a lot of really good ones out there of
Have you
frozen
guys
gluten free
tried
pizzas.
the DiGiorno deep dish
Yes.
one yet? I haven't tried it. How
Yeah.
do you like it?
We liked it a lot. I thought it was pretty similar to a frozen or like a regular frozen DiGiorno's pizza.
Is it thicker crust? Like compared to
It is,
Milton?
yes, it's a thicker crust than that because that is, yeah, like I said, most gluten-free pizzas are just very thin. So the DiGiorno's one I felt like was a little bit thicker.
Okay. That's good to know. I just haven't branched out and tried that yet. My kids,
Yes.
we do the Milton's just the plain crust, and then we put our own tomato sauce
Mm.
and cheese on because
Yeah.
my kids don't like white cheese. They want to have like Mexican brand cheese on their
How
pizza.
funny.
So
Whatever works.
yes, so we just make our own, but I haven't tried that Feel Good Food. The Feel Good Foods one is like a personal pan
Yes.
dish kind of one,
It's like
right?
a little like rectangle. It's not like a full-size pizza. It's a little bit smaller, but it's like a thick crust, which bread like the crust is my favorite part of a pizza. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I like it nice and thick.
Yeah. And there's a lot of good companies out there too. If you're interested in making your own pizza, you just kind of buy a mix and
Yes.
then you can create the amount of thickness you want in a crust. I feel like that
Hmm.
can be helpful too. But pizza is one of those things that, I mean, my kids probably eat pizza like that Milton's pizza twice a week.
Yes.
I'm like,
It's a
we eat a lot of
staple.
pizza. What are some
Yes.
other favorite things of your sons that you guys are kind of having in rotation?
Yeah. So, well, also another idea for pizzas is we also like to make pizza bagels, English muffin pizzas.
Oh, yeah.
There's so many like variations you can make a pizza, which we continued to do to try different things. Chicken nuggets are a big one, like you were saying,
Mm.
and we have quite a few that we really like. Currently, we just started doing the what is it? Real Real Good Foods. It's like coated in chickpea flour.
Oh, like they're kind of strips, chicken strips.
Yes. Yes,
Like from
but I think
Costco?
it's Real Good. Costco has them right now.
Okay, yes, I know what one you're
Yes.
talking about. Yeah.
Yes, but those ones we thought were really quite tasty. And we also like the Purdue gluten-free nuggets and tenders, but they have like a thicker crumb to them. Like the
Okay.
coating is a little bit like bigger chunks. And then my kids really like the gluten-free dino nuggets. I do not like them at
I
all.
do not like them at all. When my kids ask
The
for them, I'm
smell
like,
of
are
them,
your
I'm like,
yeah, they smell bad and they're so
yes.
crunchy that I'm like, are your teeth gonna break biting into those? I'm like, I don't know why my kids like those, but I like the Applegate chicken nuggets. They're just so expensive.
Yes.
They're so
We like
expensive.
those too, but they're expensive.
But
Yeah.
they're the best out, in my opinion, I think
Yep.
they're the best out there. Like the Dino
Hmm.
Nuggets are obviously more affordable,
Yep.
but I just do not like, that's the hard thing about like me being a gluten, like we all eat gluten-free, but like being the only gluten-free person in my family, it's hard because when we go out to dinner, if my
Hmm.
family gets gluten and your kids my kids have never finished a meal at a restaurant, never. Like,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
don't finish their food. And so I'm like, this is why I would rather have them gotten the gluten-free option so that if they didn't
So
finish
you
it,
could.
I could eat it. Because if
Hmm.
they get something and my husband devours his meal, he's not hungry, he's not still hungry, we're throwing away food
Yeah.
in the garbage can. And so some
Hmm.
people think that I'm crazy for feeding my kids gluten-free, but I'm like, the number one reason I do that is because there's less food waste with
Yeah.
kids. And so I'm like, I would rather buy the Applegate chicken nuggets because if they don't finish them,
You'll
I
eat.
can finish them.
Yes.
Yeah,
I totally get
exactly.
that. If I was gluten free, I would be in the same boat because it's when you're doing a lot of the cooking, and eating that you want to make
Yeah.
sure you can eat it all.
So Applegate, Real Good Foods. There's a co-op in my community that does like gluten-free, like in bulk boxes of chicken nuggets and chicken tenders. So I
Mhm.
wonder if anyone else's like local community has some sort of food co-op that you can order in bulk because I think that's one of the most affordable ways to do it. And I know a couple people in my
Cool.
community that do that. And so just another option
Hmm.
for people if they're curious
Yeah.
about chicken nuggets and you're trying to find a good price, see if you can buy
Hmm.
them in bulk through some sort of food co-op because that could also be a good option.
Yes.
Okay, what other things? Like any other like favorite brands that you guys like and are tried and true for you?
There's so many. It's a hard toss up between Canyon Bakehouse is our go-to for bread, for grilled cheese, PB&J's, all the sandwich things you need, French toast. Um, Cats is another one we really like. We always have their little cupcakes in the freezer
The
for
chocolate
all
ones?
their, yes, and the
Yeah.
lemon. The
Okay,
lemon
I
are really
haven't
good
tried the
too.
lemon, but I love the chocolate. I
Yes.
love it.
But there's always some random birthday party at
Oh
school
yeah.
or some party that we always keep them in the freezer so we're ready. They can be sent to school because that's another hard part of the kids having
Yeah.
celiac disease is the random food parties at school. So you
Yeah.
always have to be prepared with anything.
And now that summer's here, it's like your kids are going to, I have a girl in my neighborhood. She's 11 and she has celiac disease, and all the neighbors know that she has celiac disease. And then sometimes I'll get a random text from a neighbor like, I want to make sure that I have something for her. Like, what should I buy for her at the store that's this? And
Aw,
it's really, it's really kind and thoughtful for our neighborhood to be like, we want to make sure we have something for her so that she feels included when she's here playing on the bouncy castle all summer. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
it's really nice to have community and friends around you that take care of your kids and like know how to, help with the gluten-free thing. It means so much to us as celiacs and celiac parents when your neighborhoods or your friends say like, what can we do to make sure that they feel included? And so
Hmm.
that's such a huge part of it too, is when other people can help you, it helps the load come a little bit off of you. The weight doesn't feel as
Yes.
heavy.
Yes. Yeah. It's hard with the I mean, you never want your kid to not feel included. You never want them to feel left out and different. So we've been really lucky too with having amazing teachers and stuff that will do and go out of their way to make sure that they can be included, which means a lot because you don't want to be left out.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I'm curious what your son's favorite mac and cheese is.
Okay, so he doesn't like mac and cheese.
Okay. Dang it. All these moms are going, what? What do we do?
I know, it's crazy. It's one of those things where it's like my other two kids would eat nothing but mac and cheese, but he has never really been a fan
Never
of
cared
it.
about it. Okay,
Yes.
fine.
So
Uh,
we've tasted a few of them, but not we don't buy them regularly since he doesn't eat it.
well, lucky you. I mean, anything gluten-free is expensive, but mac and cheese is drastically
Yeah.
more expensive than just like Kraft mac and cheese.
Hmm. Yes.
And my girls, like, if they could eat mac and cheese for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, they would. Like, they love mac and cheese. And we buy the Bonza mac and cheese, the
Oh
chickpea one,
yeah.
and my kids
Hmm.
love that. And I'm like, I feel good about giving my kids that because they're getting protein
Yeah.
from it. And
Yep.
I'm like, it's just a better alternative. So if you're looking for feeding kids like your stereotypical foods, like pizza,
Hmm.
nuggets, mac and cheese,
Yeah.
sandwiches, things like that, I would agree with Katie on the sandwich bread. I really like Canyon Bakehouse as well. There's a local to Utah um bakery slash gluten-free business, and they ship nationwide as well, and they're called Mrs. Hewitt's, and they're actually my very favorite bread. But they're not like, not everyone can get it. So I'm like, as far as
Yes.
being able to pick it up from Sprouts or Whole Foods or even Target and Walmart carry them,
Yeah.
you can get the Canyon Bakehouse, and that's a good option. And one other thing too, like if you're a new parent and you're listening to this and your kid was just diagnosed, just remember that it takes time for their taste buds to change. Like, what was that experience like for you? Like, did your son like hate the food you gave him, or was he complacent about food, or was he okay? What was that like?
It was really hard. He hated it at the beginning because he was like, this
This
isn't what
doesn't
I'm used
taste.
to. This
Yeah.
doesn't taste like what I'm used to. And so it was really hard to adjust to it. But I find myself even now, like, it's funny because I remember eating, gluten-free bread and being like, oh my gosh, like this is weird. And now I'm like, this tastes great. Like I've gotten so used to it now. And I even will have, I have regular bread um when I'm out of the house and stuff and he's not with me. But it was an adjustment because things do taste different
Mm.
and fall apart differently than, they used to.
Yeah, definitely. So give yourself time, keep
Yes.
trying, keep experimenting, keep introducing the food until, their bodies will adjust and their taste buds will adjust and their mindset adjusts, and just
Mhm.
just be patient with that process, because eventually you'll get to the point where they don't remember what gluten tastes like. Like
Yes,
me,
it's crazy.
I'm in my mid 30s and I'm like, I don't remember. And it's only been 8 years for me. I mean, that's a long time, but I
Yeah.
really don't remember. Like, it's really hard for me to remember certain textures in my mouth. I'm like, obviously, if I can smell it, I'm like, oh, that smells so good. But I'm like, I just don't remember what the texture is. I'm like, I'm totally happy and satisfied with gluten-free bread. Like, I just am not picky anymore. But
Yeah.
it's funny how you just kind of adjust. And so, parents, just
Hmm.
remember your kids will adjust. It will take a little
Yep.
time, but eventually it'll be okay. Okay. I'm trying to think. Is there any other tips or any other like words of wisdom that you would want to give to a parent whose child was just diagnosed with celiac?
Just go easy on yourself. And remember, like I was saying earlier, it's a lot of your responsibility for their diagnosis and teach them to be their own advocate because especially if they're diagnosed young, you may be there a lot of the time in the beginning, but as they get older, they're going to be on their own and teaching them how to say no and I can't or reading a label, things like that is really important so that they have the tools that they need when they're out on their own and look at eating their own food and deciding what they want to eat and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they're gonna fly the nest eventually. So they need to they
Yes.
need to learn
Yeah.
skills. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
And
that's
it's even
great.
been, I remember my son had a substitute at school and you brought him out for me to pick him up. And she was like, I just have to say, I'm so impressed that he knew what to ask and what he could have and what he couldn't have. And I was like, yay, it's working. He knows what he can
Yeah.
and can't have. And it's good to see that because you don't want them to just be having whatever they want when they're not in your
Under
uh
your care. Yeah.
under your care. Yes.
Yeah, I always worry about that. That's something that I'm like always praying about often, is like, bless my girls when they're not with me. Like I'm just like, I always just worry about them when they're not with me. But then
Yes.
kids are so resilient and they're so, they always surprise us. Kids really surprise, like my kids surprise me all the time. And I think that
Hmm.
you'll be surprised by the skills that your kids can learn and what they can understand and comprehend and how they can advocate for themselves. So that's a super great tip. Tell everybody where they can find you on social media and website, anything that you want to share about what you're offering online.
Yes. So you can find me on Instagram at Eat Pretty Darling, and then on my website as well. I have some gluten-free gear and host some gluten-free cooking classes in the area too at eatprettydarling.com.
Okay. And tell me where you're located again.
I am in the Dayton, Ohio area.
Okay, so if you're listening and you're in that general area, cooking classes, you have lots of fun, cute kids merch, stickers and
Yes.
t-shirts and stuff like that for your gluten-free kiddos. So check her out. Follow her on Instagram, check out her website. When she launches her new book, be sure to support her and get information and recipes for your kiddos. And we hope that you found this helpful and we're cheering you on. We're here to
Yes.
help if you need any assistance or any help. Me or Katie are more than willing to chat with you in our DMs or help however we can. We know it can be
Mhm.
a really challenging time, and having support and having a lifeline can be really helpful. So we are here for you and we're cheering you on, and we hope you all have a wonderful gluten-free week. Bye.
Bye.